Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Simply Human. I'm Christina Caro, clinical psychologist, and this is my partner, Karen Lee Linsky. Hi, Karen.
Hey, Christina. I'm so excited to talk about today's topic. So, today, what we're really going to dive into is something we all do, holding back our true thoughts and relationships. Come on, guys, raise your hand if you've done that. Christina, I've done it. Have you ever done that? Yes. It's just a simple thing that we always do and don't even know that sometimes that we're doing it. And we don't realize how this well-intentioned silence, because we just want to be there for somebody, or holding it back because we don't want to go into conflict, actually causes more harm than good. And this is why I'm so excited about this topic. So, Christina, why don't you talk more about it?
Yeah, folks, we're continuing exploring using the model of the Johari window, and I'm going to bring that up for a second. And if you recall, if you listen to our episode on the Johari window, there's a quadrant that is information that you know, but it's not known to other people, and that's called the hidden quadrant. And we talked about how one of the goals in interpersonal relationships is to make what is in the open, so known to yourself and known to others, a bigger part of your experience. And that with the hidden means we have to get better and more comfortable with disclosing. So today, we're going to look at one aspect of what people tend to have in the hidden, and that's hidden thoughts. So we can have hidden emotions, we can have hidden values, but today we're going to be focusing just on hidden thoughts.
Now, before we start, though, Christina, you know what I'm going to say. And I think those people who are listening to us all the time will know what I'm going to say, which is we would really love for you to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, share, and hit that notification button so you know when new episodes like this are posted. We are so excited, and we're very blessed to be able to do this every week. And for you podcast listeners, hit the text us link in the show notes with your comments and questions. Because on either platform, if you leave a comment of 7 words or more, that will really help the algorithm recognize it as meaningful engagement. And that is just so easy, because you could even just say, I made it to the very end. And that is 7 words. And it really helps her get our channel to more and more people. And that's what we want to do. We do this because we want to share our knowledge to help others. So, Christine, I want to ask you this question that is really interesting when we talk about this topic about the paradox of protection. Because you think you're being silent for a good reason, but in actuality, it's more hurting you. So, can
Yeah.
you tell some more about that? Like, what's behind all that?
We did an episode, I believe, Karen, right, on people pleasing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about how we as human beings, there's a primitive part of our brain that is very oriented just to our survival.
Yep.
And as humans, we need to survive in a group. From saber-toothed tigers, you're going to be more lucky surviving a saber-toothed tiger attack if there's a whole group, if you have a whole cave full of people. So in our emotional brain, there lives certain survival fears. So we have fear of being thrown out of the cave. We have fear of being rejected. We have fear of there being conflict. So one of the reasons why we hide our thoughts is because we're trying to maintain harmony. So sometimes we do that because we think the thoughts that we're having, oh, it's going to hurt. I hear this all the time. Well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Any kind of interpersonal conversation, I hear this from clients all the time. And so then I'll basically say whatever it is in this really flat, neutral, or inquiry tone, and I'll ask them, did that sound mean? And they'll be like, well, no. I'll be like, so why don't you say it out loud? And I can tell you so many times, it is such an unconscious habit. Not the not saying something, that's a conscious decision, but the underlying reason why it's
Yeah, yeah,
unconscious.
yeah, yeah.
And I'll
I
be like,
think it,
well, yeah, it
yeah.
doesn't sound bad the way you say it. And I was like, okay, well, how are you saying it?
And it's so interesting because I don't want to ever hurt someone's feelings. I make that assumption. Anything negative
Yes.
equals, that's the problem, the equal. But it's where it comes from the heart and how you say it, the tone and all this stuff that makes the difference. And so I think this
Yes.
is where we forget. That's why in my practice, I'm doing a coaching is focused on intentionality, coming in with curiosity and not accusing or blame or anything. I think when we start to think about that, it allows you to be more open. And naturally, we don't want to hurt. I'm Christian, right? So I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I want to be a good Christian. But I don't really think that being a good Christian is hiding my thoughts because I think we're hurting them and I'm hurting myself as well.
Well, that's the
Right?
irony. That's the irony, right? So we're trying to keep our relationships steady by not rocking the boat.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then what we're
Yeah. Yeah.
actually doing is we're sabotaging. We're literally drilling holes in the boat because what happens when we feel we can't share what we're really thinking, a lot of times resentment builds up, fear builds up. There's a whole bunch
Yeah,
of
it's so
we'll go
true.
into that in a few minutes, but that's the whole paradox is the driver is this fear of creating conflict, of hurting people's feelings, of not being liked, of being rejected. So we keep those thoughts hidden, but it's still got the emotional load to it. We still have the beliefs, whatever it is. And now we're not disclosing, we're not being honest. Fundamentally, we're not being honest. And so then we have the risk of actually damaging the relationship.
It's interesting though, guys. I don't know if you guys, but I really like metaphors. The boat and putting a hole in the boat. But the boat is really good for this particular thing because I see a lot as you let one thing go with a hidden thought, and then before you know it, I let another hole in the boat, and it's like my relationship is literally sinking. And then I have this relationship where I don't even want to spend time with them anymore because I feel like I can't be me. And I love that metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll go into that a little bit more in just a second, but I do wanna just qualify a little bit. Now,
Okay.
just like in the past, we're not saying that, "Okay, just open the kimono," you know?
Tell them everything you feel.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
Yeah.
no
Exactly. Yeah.
discernment, no
Right.
filter, just
Exactly.
like
I get it.
bleh,
Right.
everything that you think. That's not what we're saying either. So there is a
Exactly.
place for privacy. There is a place for sitting with discomfort with that thought as you go through a process of reflection. So this is what we're trying to get to is the concept of discernment. Karen, we've talked about this. It comes from a religious, I think you're discerning what
Yeah.
God wants for you.
Mhm.
For me, as a not religious person, discernment is judgment combined with wisdom.
Wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the same with Christianity. It's the judgment with wisdom.
Yeah. So you want to engage in some self-reflection, like, why am I keeping this hidden? What is the fear? Is that fear legitimate? Is there a way to mitigate that fear? Who is served by keeping this hidden? Am I aligning with my values by not saying what I really think? Is this helping the relationship or hurting the relationship? So we want you to go through more of an intentional introspective process to get to a point where you feel comfortable. And we have a number of different episodes. I'll put a link to the playlist on communication and managing conflict because when you get more skillful at how you communicate, it will seem less scary that you're going to be thrown out of the cave.
Because this is the one thing we talked earlier about. We're talking about imposter syndrome, even, right? Is it taking you away from the relationship or bringing or dragging you? Does it help with the relationship? And I think that's a really important part of the discernment. Like you said, that was the last step in what you just shared. And I think that's really the intention though, because even when you hold things back, you're afraid it's going to hurt. But that's where you have to decide, is it really, really, really going to hurt? Or is that your intention where it actually helps build the next level of the relationship and becomes a more honesty?
Yeah, matter of fact, I'd like to invite everyone to take a moment to think about a time when somebody shared their honest thoughts with you skillfully. Were you appreciative of it or were you like, oh, I'm never going to speak to that person again? Like, if we think about our own experience, we want to know, like, if we're doing something that's bothering somebody, we want to know because maybe it's not a big deal for us and we can make that change rather than that person being afraid of rocking the boat and then nursing resentment. This goes to the hidden costs. So one of the hidden costs is emotional distance. Like when we hide our thoughts, we are creating these invisible barriers because it's part of what Karen just said, who you really are or your authentic self.
Yeah. And when you just asked us to think of a time, it's when I even think in a time with my husband, Mark, and I think he's saying something, and I first put it off as him nagging me, and then I realized it's really out of love that he comes at it. But I got so defensive about it. He was actually sharing it out of love. And his statement was about the world doesn't revolve around you. And he explained it, but I wasn't there because I was just like, just sound like another nagging thing to me. And then I was more open and understanding what his intention were. It totally shifted it. And in fact, my life is so different since he made that comment. I started to understand the complexity of the comment. So I think for me, it's like what you just said. It's where the tone coming from, and listen to the tone. And I get caught up in words so much. I think that's part of my problem. Instead of where that is coming from. It's like what I said earlier about heart to heart. When your heart to heart speaks and you know their intention is pure, it just makes it so different. But sometimes I'm just so used to this negative, I just think that it's not coming from the heart. It's against me, and then it doesn't allow me to open. So
yeah, there's an automatic response over our life experience. People become more and more protective, and then you see more and more defensiveness. There's experts in relationships, the Gottmans, John and Julie Gottman, and they talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and criticism is one of the 4 horsemen, and defensiveness is one of them. And then the third
I
is
could see that.
stonewalling. And you think about stonewalling, is there is a lot going on when someone's really quiet. What they found with stonewalling, so that's when a person's really quiet and you're trying to talk to them, isn't that it's like passive aggressive. They're actually silently self-soothing, kind of like, okay, just stay quiet and this will pass and they'll go away and they'll stop, and so they're just really self-soothing. But we have to learn how to create an environment and a culture and a relationship culture that values this honesty so that it feels safe for both people. And that kind of leads to, when we don't do this, some of the consequences are loss of intimacy, because that real connection requires vulnerability and honesty. Like I said, resentment builds up because there's unexpressed thoughts that, the thoughts don't go away just because you're not saying them. They get stuffed. I mean, how many times have I've heard people say, well, I just stuff it. Well, better not to rock the boat. There's an absolute impact on mental health when you're spending a lot of energy basically self-censoring. You're catching that thought before it comes out because you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to hurt the person. You don't want to start an argument. And that takes mental energy that's not available to put to creative pursuits. And then over time, trust, it's just, remember, Karen, in the work environment, I mean, think about this. When there's a lot of cognitive energy being spent holding back, not saying things, you have that much less energy to be putting towards innovation and creativity and building strong teams, like cohesiveness. It's not there. I know you're working with some teams recently, and I don't know if this is something you see when you're helping people.
It's very interesting, this whole concept of energy, because it's not something that we talk a lot about in business, the energy, but it's there when you don't say something because of the fear, right? Or you don't want to say anything, how much you're worried about that fear. And then you're not even present in the whole meeting because you're so fearful and discussing that. And I should have said that. Like later on, I remember when I was first starting out in the business, and a lot of people do this. They don't want to say anything. And then they're making that decision. Should I say it? Should I not? And then they're not even present. So then they lost the moment, right? Because they chose that.
And it's not just about fear, right? Because I've certainly been in meetings where it wasn't fear of rocking the boat. It was judgment. So judgments are thoughts as well. And what you see, they're not saying anything, but it's the eye rolling and the smirking. And I remember this one guy like turned his seat around and he like had his back face everybody. So he was communicating through body language, but he wasn't actually putting the thoughts out there, or wasn't putting the judgments, but yet it was oozing everywhere. And that's almost worse when it's not being brought up honestly. Hey, I don't really agree with that. I think you're going in the wrong direction. And instead you're eye rolling and huffing and puffing. Oh, that's an emotional trigger for people, and they're just gonna think, "Oh, you're an a-hole," right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then why are you even here? Because you know what? Either will sense the
Right,
fact that you're holding back and they can't trust you. So you're like,
right.
that's the whole point of that. In the business environment or even any relationships, it's that trust that matters. I'm gonna respect what you say when I've trust in what you say. But if you're holding back, and I know you're holding
Mhm.
back, because remember, the interesting part is we keep telling you that I wish I knew earlier was the body is telling more of the signs before the words get out. I love what you said about there's so much like resentment, impacting your mental health, trust erosion. So talk about your social, like the relationship side from your clients. Or some of the other things,
Yeah, this is so common because when I'm working with, like, say, couples, so in that situation, harmony is a priority, not creating conflict. So you see a lot more of that avoidance, like something that your partner's doing is bothering you. And instead of bringing up, when you withhold and you're trying to suppress, it's again, it shows up in body language, it shows up
Yeah.
in energy or mood, or they just tell you like you're a little bit shut down. And then your partner asks you, hey, like, is something going on? And your response is like, no, it's fine. It's all good.
And you're like, yeah, right.
Yeah, then
I-
the thing is, people, I want you to get this. Your partner knows right then and there you just lied to them. Okay? Like, let that sink in. They know you're not being honest. They know you're withholding something. They don't know how to necessarily invite you. They feel like they did. They just asked you, hey, is something going on? That was the invitation. And so it's like swatted away and they don't know what to do. So then their thoughts are now hidden because they're like, I don't know what the F's going on. Like, whatever. They're just mad again. Well, I probably did something wrong. Like, these are all the inner dialogue going on.
yeah.
And there's all this inner back and forth, inner dialogue that's not being said instead of it being brought in the open. And it definitely is a pretty common source of actual conflict is the not communicating.
It's true. And what I was thinking about just now, because I was telling you earlier how I got together with some of my friends, and I was just reflecting back on different things. There's so many times when I felt like I should divorce Mark. Now, we've been together for over 34 years. And I think it's because I held all these resentments and just thinking the way we were acting. And I didn't realize it was me too. I was blaming him because I'd be comparing it to quote unquote those perfect couples. And no couple was perfect, right? And then Mark, I always like bringing out his negative traits, his negative traits, his negative traits. And I didn't realize I had to start thinking about, let me just put him on even playing field again. And let me just start again. Like, let me just see him with fresh eyes. So I started out with thinking about, why did I marry him in the first place? Like, what attracted me to him first? So it's usually that whole thing helped even it out again, because I realized how much, like you said earlier, about resentment is building and building and
Yeah.
building. And I really felt like I should get a divorce because I was not happy at all. And I'm realizing I had to give him a fair chance again, because he's not like the person that he was a month ago, 5 months ago, 5 years ago, right? Because we evolve, and understanding where my equation is. But my whole point of this is I wish I would have been more sharing like these hidden thoughts that could help bring our relationship closer. And I wasn't very good because I just didn't want to do that again, right? Because I was so full of resentment and just couldn't do it. And this is where you can change the table by how I show up, because then
Mhm.
he'll show up differently. It's just a choice you have to make to start to change and be aware of how you're showing up and your intention of wanting to have dialogue together.
Mhm.
So,
So, yeah, and then we definitely see this in our marriages and those types of relationships, but just think about it. I think it actually happens quite a bit in families,
oh yeah.
especially,
Oh,
in our current times where we're having a lot more polarization in families. And this is where that discernment, like, do you bring up your difference of opinion? Do you not bring up your difference of opinion? Like, it's Thanksgiving dinner. Sometimes you wish Uncle Joe would just keep his thoughts to himself, than having to tell everybody. It's definitely an art. But again, we're not saying that every single thought that passes through your head is something that should just be like,
yeah.
bleh. There's some discernment, But we want to just focus right now on that there is times when we are keeping things hidden that are actually having the opposite effect. We've talked a little bit family dynamics. There's avoiding sometimes it's things like talking about money, talking about your partner's spending habits, talking about parenting decisions. Like there are so many things in family dynamics. There's a keeping hidden or we're not disclosing for that harmony in the family. And this is where what I said about creating a culture and a norm around healthy disclosure is something that you work to build over time. And the same goes into professional context. Like you need a leader often who is going to set the tone of open communication, basically. Karen, have you ever coached an executive on skills or strategies or ways that they could create more of an open communication environment in the culture?
You know what? My whole business is around that. It's like what you just said, it's being intentional and having discernment. And it's just slowing. So no matter what, it comes down to this whole thing about intentional curiosity, like purity in your curiosity, not just saying, or like repeating what they said and say, did I get you right? But it's really being engaged and being present. When I slow that down to them and understanding that they didn't do it on purpose to you and the world does not revolve around you. I love using that statement since my husband taught me that. But anyways, I think it's the ability to use the I statements really does help. And some of these other things about that skillful disclosure. But why don't you tell a little bit? Because I know you do it more with your clients. You do a lot more than I do. Tell me a little about what some of the actual things that you do with your clients.
Well, this is what's interesting about being on the spectrum is a lot of the unspoken rules that seem to influence people about keeping things hidden, they're based on social norms. And that's what my brain doesn't have software for. Like it's not innately there. These recognition of social norms or the ability to unconsciously pick them up and integrate them into my brain. So I have to do maybe the little bit opposite. I had to work more on the aspect of not saying everything that came to my mind,
Okay. Okay.
because I don't know these social rules and what you say and what you don't say. So in some ways, it's made me a really good therapist because it allows me to challenge all of the unspoken and unconscious rules when I see that it's causing conflict. So then I can question it and like, well, why is it that you can't say XYZ? And oftentimes I find they don't even know why they can't say X, Y, and Z. And then I'll role model it. And what you said, which is the curiosity and the kindness and the tone, coming from that genuine place. And they'll see, they're like, well, that didn't sound bad at all. I was like, okay. I always ask, did I sound mean? Did I sound rude? No. I'm like, okay. What? And what I'm finding is the reason people fear saying things is because it's gotten to the point where there's resentment. So now if they were to say something, it would have that tone. That would likely cause the conflict. Whereas me, I'm like still kind of confused and not sure what's going on. So I had genuine curiosity. So they get to see
Yeah.
what that looks like.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because the more I coach people to be very intentional, you just don't go in and give someone feedback and just say, hey, I got you, give you feedback. You use the words like, I want to share something that worked for me. And that's that bringing that I in, which allows it to say, I want to share something that really worked for me in this situation because I felt like da da da, right? And when you have that genuine thing, it's not just because you're giving feedback, but you're also doing it in the moment. So the more you wait and wait and wait, like my most successful coachee, I should say, is he's learning to do it in the moment more. And I think that's where our managers have to go more, not waiting to the feedback or whatever, but saying after me, oh my God, that was really great. The part I really loved was this. You can't just go in and just start giving them feedback until you establish some of that trust. And I think it's all based on the trust level too. But again, if you don't have that trust level, you begin to build the trust because they know
Right.
your intention is to serve them, not to serve yourself. That's the biggest problem,
The
right? And
open
I think sometimes that
communication leads,
competitiveness.
yeah,
Yeah.
the open communication is what leads to trust.
Yeah. And
And
I think the problem is in the business world, it feels sometimes that there's this competitiveness gene in there that we always have. It's the hidden, I think, in some ways where you don't want to be like, I personally don't want to be competitive. Some people like to be competitive.
Well, yeah, I used to be a consultant, and I remember there was another team, And it was so interesting. This is the type of contract they were on. It fostered competitiveness. And so what was hidden was if they got a lead from the client, or the client, there was a lead, is that you keep that little morsel to yourself until you had some meeting, and then you're the hero and you bring it forward instead of being much more forthcoming and sharing. So there was a lot of keeping hidden information and nuggets, because that gave you power.
Yeah.
That gave you, oh, I'm going to save my billable hours because I'm going to go try to build this lead on my own. I don't want to share it with so-and-so, like they might steal the thunder. Like all of that kind of stuff. It really, and this is a team. This is a team. So it wasn't helping the greater benefit of the team. So one of the things I would invite people to do is just take a moment and brainstorm a little bit. What are all your rules, your unconscious rules that you haven't really thought about, that is what tells you don't say something? And you can do it in a work environment. You can do it in your personal life. Like, what are all the things I've told myself are the rules so that I don't disclose? And then for a moment, just challenge, is it serving me? Ask yourself, is it serving me? So let's just go real quick. How do we do this? If we are going to bring more information from the hidden and disclose, we want to do it in a skillful manner, because our goal, again, is to expand that open. So there's some things you want to think about. And the first is timing. You don't want to come when somebody's had a really hard day and then you bring forward some piece of information. You want to choose an appropriate moment when the other person is receptive and can be present. And you can even say that, just say, hey, there's something important I wanted to share with you. Because remember, it's sharing. It's something inside me. It's a thought that I had. So it's something I want to share with you. And is this a good time? Okay. Your intention should be set. Be clear. It should be focused on growth and understanding, and not on just offloading months of resentment. If it's like, I can't hold this reason, I'm just mad, and there's an emotional charge, that's not the time.
But I love what you said, because you're asked that question because it's their choice. And it gives me that choice. Is this a good time? And it makes me say, no, it's not. But let's talk about it tomorrow, because then it's their time to set. And I think that's what's important, because then I know you care about me, because I'm like, okay, I got to tell you right now. Let's meet right now.
Well, and I would say ask the person to be really specific about when then, because there are, people will conflict avoid by saying, well, can we talk about tomorrow? And then they never come back and say, I'm free now. So it is something you want to share, and just say, okay, yeah, thank you for letting me know. Can we set a time? Because this is important to me. And again, if you've thought about your intention, which is the second part, you can share the intention. I think this is going to be really helpful for us, or I think it'll help me feel closer to you. Or I think it'll help us get through this challenge we're facing with the client. Whatever it is, be clear on your intention. In your language, Karen mentioned we use I statements because we are owning our own thoughts. And I like to say the story in my head when you're talking about interpersonal relationship or couples, and you have some thought about, I think that the person is mad at me, or I think that person really didn't want to do X, Y, Z, or whatever it is. It's a thought, it's a conclusion, it's a judgment. There's some sort of thought you had, but remember, it's based on your assumptions. So a way to bring it up is to say, listen, the story in my head is that you didn't really want to see my mother yesterday. And then that's why you were really quiet throughout the dinner. Okay, that's the story in my head. Like, you were basically punishing me. And then we've done an episode, we'll put a link below, on a skill called advocacy with inquiry, where you stop and pause and think about, what's the assumption that you made? What was that behavior? So let's just use this. Like, you had to go see your folks and your partner was really shut down, and the story in your head is they really didn't want to go, and so this is their passive aggressive way of punishing me, is they just didn't engage. So you observed that they were quiet. That's the observable behavior. And then the story in your head is when you jumped up the ladder of inference and inferred heard what that quietness meant. And what we ask you to do is walk back down the ladder to that base level of observable behavior and say, I noticed that you were really quiet at my mother's house, and the story in my head is X. Is that what was going on? So now what you've done is not only are you bringing your hidden thoughts into the open, you are inviting the other person to bring their hidden thoughts into the open. So now we have more of a balance. So is that,
Yeah.
see how
Yeah, and
that'll
I
work?
think, and sometimes it's interesting because the hidden thoughts, when you're talking about it too, is very much the assumptions that I'm making.
Yes.
And I think that's what it is I never put the two together until just now when you're trying that explain. It's like I'm just running back to that assumption as to what I think went on, and that's why it's important to inquire, and that's what.
Yes, often what's in the hidden in terms of hidden thoughts are judgments and assumptions.
Mhm.
That probably makes up the bulk of hidden
Yeah.
thoughts. So there's
Yeah.
also opinions,
Mhm.
but an opinion is often just a subset of a judgment.
Yeah, that's what I would
So
think. Yeah.
so really when you think about, let me go look into my own hidden thoughts, they can also be things like, well, they're still judgments. It's like it could be
Yeah.
your own opinion about something. So look at for assumptions, looks for the judgments, and
Exactly.
then
In the
ask that
moment. Yeah.
question, is it serving me? How can I test this belief I have that being more open about it is going to create conflict? Because, like we said earlier, there's a cost to keeping everything suppressed, in that your partner feels, or your teammates feel, that there's something between you. There's some sort of distance. There's something unspoken. And that is getting in the way of closeness and intimacy and trust, which is what we're trying to build. It's really important to understand when we're doing disclosure, it's incremental. When you're practicing, when you're first learning, start with small disclosures and then build confidence as you get better at the skills, and then work on creating that safe space with the people that you're doing this practice with, and consider it a practice. The way I work with clients is I talk a lot about developing practices, because it's like, say you wanted to become a concert pianist. You wouldn't just sit down at a piano for the first time and have this expectation that you could be a concert pianist, right? No, you would have to practice to get the skills. You get someone who would coach you. But over time, when you practice, you get better and better and better at it.
And you get better because then you've actually rewired your brain of the new way to have a conversation, a new way. And that's what we've been able to do through our work. And we're still doing it. I mean, I'm always rewiring my brain in situations and things like that. And I think that's the beauty of it. That's what I love about the neuroplasticity of our brain, because we
Mm.
can create new ways of doing it. Then it becomes just automatic because it's a journey.
Yeah.
This is the whole point that we're on this journey. All right. So is it time to wrap up now?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just recap. So if we're using the boat metaphor and you think about, I don't want to rock the boat, but I want y'all to sort of have this picture that sometimes gentle waves, that's going to keep the boat afloat better than if you're on still water, but you're drilling holes in the bottom
Yeah.
of your boat,
Yeah.
because you're
The
just
gentle waves
sabotaging.
moves it on that journey.
It does move it, does move it forward.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and the thing is, keeping things hidden that need to be in the open is equivalent to just drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter how on the surface it seems everything is calm. You are literally sabotaging the
Yeah.
relationship. So
Wow.
it is important to develop this skill. We encourage everyone to maybe do a little practice and try to identify one hidden thought that, if you really looked at it, maybe isn't as dangerous as you thought. And then we'll put these quick little steps of the process into the show notes in terms of timing, intention, and language. And then, ask your partner, ask your teammate if they can have some time. Be vulnerable and say, I want to practice being more open in areas where I feel anxious about sharing my thoughts. Would you be willing to be a practice partner with me? And we just did an episode on the language of willingness. Most people will want to say yes to that to help you out, and practice sharing that small disclosure. And then after, process with the person. How did that feel to you when I said that? Because the story in my head is that you were going to be mad at me. And maybe the person will say, oh, well, it was a little bit of ouch, but gosh, I'm really glad you told me. Like, it wasn't my intention to do X, Y, Z. And I would much rather know than keep doing the thing that's upsetting you because I care about you. Often that's what the case is. People are so relieved when they find out like what's actually, because remember, if all they know is there's tension and something's going on, they're making up their own stories in their head. Their own hidden thoughts are building up. This is why we want to think about that Johari window and opening up, becoming more open and having less that's hidden as we develop skills. So we hope that this was helpful for folks. Again, please go to the show notes. We'll have some little tips in there, and we'll have links to past episodes that can help you in the mastering of certain communication skills.
So again, we'd love for you to subscribe to our channel to engage with us and to continue to make this available to yourself and others by making a comment or sharing something to address some of the stuff that you are facing.
Okay,
Until next
next
time.
time.
Okay.
See you, everybody.
It's a very